I went through a lot of heartbreak and it was a dark night of the soul for me. I was broken up with a man I thought I was going to get married to and have kids with. My business was crumbling. I remember my accountant saying to me, I think you're going to go bankrupt, Nerida. This isn't going to last. So now looking back, I can clearly see I created FlowZone because I needed it for myself.
What is your kind of advice to those people that are in that mode now, in that dark night of the soul? What's the next step for them?
Yeah, I love that question. So
our guest today radiates positively infectious energy. She's a coach, she's a leader, she's a business owner and a mentor. Nerida is also the founder of FlowZone. Prepared to be inspired. Talk us through the stages of this journey in getting FlowZone to where it was.
business is such an incredible pursuit to attain is because it's all about overcoming yourself over and over and over again.
Usually to get an arc like this, to have that realization, there's like a rock bottom moment. Take us to a moment where you're like, this has to change. What was going on for you?
I'll never forget.
Nerida, what does flow mean to you?
Oh, I love this question. For me, flow is...
Nez, I'm stoked to have you here. I'm just so stoked to have you here. Nez, what does flow mean to you?
Oh, I love this question. Thank you so much for having me. So for me, flow is the ability to create space in your life to be able to hear the whispers and notice the synchronicities and the little ways that people tell you that you've got potential in something that guide you to your purpose. I think that we live in such a culture of being so busy and so just filling our time with things that we actually don't allow ourselves to listen to see what comes in. And I think when you listen to that voice, you're more inclined to live in alignment with your values. And then that's what leads you to a life that feels really fulfilling, that you enjoy every day, where you're in your purpose.
Wow, that is just like one of the most articulate answers I've ever had on that topic. This is right in your wheelhouse, isn't it?
Totally. It's my jam.
You are made for this pod.
Yes.
I've known you for quite some time.
I think nearly 15 years.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things about flow. When it's happening, time dilates.
Yes, true.
But we're not always in it,
yes.
are we?
Yes. So true.
And it hasn't always been like that for you.
No.
So for our viewers and listeners, like talk us through the stages of this journey in getting FlowZone to where it was.
Yeah, I love that question. So, you know, this would have been 2014. I remember we have a mutual friend, Erin Madison, and I had an idea to create a women's only gym. And what was really interesting about it, at that point, I didn't have any friends that were entrepreneurs. All of my friends were people that worked in business they had employment, they were employed. And I remember having this idea to start this women's only gym. And, if I told 10 people, 8 of them would say, that's never going to work. It's never going to happen. Don't bother thinking about it. And then I had this friend say to me, you know what, I think it might work. I think it's a good idea. I'll introduce you to a good friend of mine, Mark Cantwell, and you can have a chat to him about it. And, back then I didn't really understand how valuable your time was. So the fact that you were willing to sit with me in a cafe for 2 hours, for nothing, and then you ended up buying me breakfast. And I remember you so passionately saying to me, Nerida, you can do this, you can have a go at this. These are all the things that you need to do. And listening to you so infectiously talk about business and entrepreneurship and passion and purpose was the thing that lit me up. And I just had never been exposed to anything like that before. And so obviously that was the catalyst to me creating Newcastle's biggest and best women's only gym. If not, at one point it was Australia's leading women's only gym. Back then there was 2 women's only gyms in all of Newcastle. Now there are 15.
Whoa.
So it's incredible. So
you've broken the water.
Yeah, it was amazing. And so I ran that for nearly 10 years up until COVID happened. And then at the same time as COVID, I went through a breakup the same month. And it was like my divine storm. Everything was falling apart in order for things to come back together. And I went through a lot of heartbreak and it was a dark night of the soul for me. I remember for months, it was lockdown. I couldn't see anybody. I was living by myself. I had to move out of our house. I was broken up with a man I thought I was going to get married to and have kids with. My business was crumbling. I remember my accountant saying to me, I think you're going to go bankrupt, Nerida. This isn't going to last. And I was like, what is happening? But what was interesting was I didn't really realize how much trauma I had that I had not healed. I didn't realize how much my self-worth was tied up in my business. I didn't realize how much I was clinging to someone that wasn't really right for me. I didn't realize how disconnected I was from myself and who I really was. And that couple of months was, so pivotal in me developing the foundation of who I really was and actually connecting to myself. And so I just dove into all things like healing, emotional intelligence, inner child, psychology. I was just fascinated. I was just trying to figure myself out. And then it just started to speak to me. And the more I was learning about this, the more I could see it was everywhere. People were struggling everywhere around me. And I sort of walked two sides of this road for a while where I had the gyms, but I also was so interested in this coaching. And I just naturally had people asking me to coach them. And then after a while, I just knew that the right thing to do was to sell the gyms and dive into this full time. So I sold La Somme in 2022 and I've been in this business for 3 years now and I could not be more grateful.
Oh, wow. You just covered so much in that spiel. I love it. No, don't be sorry. It's like super succinct. Yeah. And as you're spelling that out, like I'm picturing so much of that. 2 gyms of your own. There was 2 gyms in total that were female when you started in that year to now 15, like that multiplication factor. Mm-hmm. I think that's really impressive on that front alone, that you were zigging when others are zagging, but now you've opened up a chasm for other people.
Yeah.
In that sort of period, that 2 months, like usually to get an arc like this, to have that realization, there's like a rock bottom moment.
Oh, yeah.
You call it the dark night of the soul.
Yes.
Take us to a moment where you're like, this has to change. What was going on for you?
I'll never forget. And this is something I want to speak to. A lot of people that will be listening to this podcast will identify with this. I was such an overachiever, but I was always in my thinking mind. I was constantly busy. I was constantly thinking, analyzing, and just doing. I could never really be present and I could never really allow myself to feel any feelings. Anytime I had sadness pop up, I would push it down. Anytime I had anger, I would push it down. Shame, push it down. Fear, push it down. And I remember sort of diving into this, a couple of books and really trying to understand where my blocks were. And I really understood I was not able to feel my feelings. And that is a huge sort of contributor to why I was feeling so stuck. And so I said to myself, okay, I'm going to fully let myself feel all of this breakup, this business potentially falling apart, this confusion around what COVID was and this lockdown and being so isolated and not having spoken to a human being for weeks. I said, I'm really going to let myself fully feel it. And I remember crumbling for 24 to 48 hours. I was crying, heaving, and I had these moments of like complete, utter despair and even suicidal thoughts, to then these feelings of like pure calm and peace and just absolute clarity. And I'll never forget the next morning, I woke up and I just felt like I had this hangover from just crying so much. And I thought, I'm just going to go for a walk and go for a swim at the beach and get in the water and cleanse myself. And as I came out of my apartment, I remember for the first time, I could hear birds singing. I could feel the sun on my skin. I could feel the wind in my hair. I was so alert and attuned to every single sense. And I was like, I get it now. I had to fully feel all of the darkness in order to allow myself to feel all of the joy and lightness. If you are unwilling to go to the depths, you will never get to the height. Most people sort of live in this section here, just in the middle ground. And after I fully surrendered and I just let myself go with the experience, from that point, I've experienced pure happiness and joy and love and freedom and fulfillment in nothingness, like in absolute, not needing anything outside of me to be any different. And it was such a gift. So that was a huge turning point for me where I really understood my mind and my heart was so disconnected, and that was the beginning of me reconnecting those two parts of myself.
Wow. That's an amazing level of self-awareness that you've discovered within yourself, because like awareness is something it's already available to you, but we don't always tune in.
Oh yeah. Well, we don't unless there's pain, do we?
Well, yeah, like so that's the thing, like, you'd been existing in this state, but then it needed to be compound effect, perfect storm to get that dark night of the soul that we just talked about. But then from that has just come so much renewal and sort of just to hear those physical sensations.
Well, it was really interesting because I would say prior to that, I'd always been really interested in self-development, but from a place of judgment and judging other people. And this was one of the reasons why the breakup happened, because I remember my partner saying to me at the time, Nerida, I feel like I'm not good enough for you. And I remember that being such a confusing moment for me because I loved him and I wanted to be with him and I wanted to get married and all of the things. But I didn't realize that I was actually subtly, criticizing him, blaming him, judging him, shaming him. And I was doing this from a place of pain because I could not see the pain that was within myself. And so when all of this sort of happened, like I really remember sitting there thinking, I'm 38 years old. I really yearn to be a mother and to be a wife and to get married and have children. And why is this not working for me? It was the first time I really took a look at myself. It was the first time I turned the mirror on me and I was like, what is it within me that keeps creating this? Because that's the one common dynamic here, right? It's me. And that's when I realized how emotionally disconnected I was from myself. And at the time, I never had anyone say to me, Nerida, I feel like you just understand me, or I feel like you just accept me, or I feel like you really get me. And now I hear that all the time from men that I date, people, my clients, my friends, my family. But it all started from doing that for myself. I had to understand myself first and take radical responsibility for everything I was creating in my life.
I'm just letting that absorb. 2020, that was happening.
2020.
COVID.
Yep. March 20, I'll never forget it.
March 2020.
Yes. Yep.
So I was in Thailand at the time. I was doing a charity ride for Hands Across the Water with a crew called Digital Live. And so we were riding 500 Ks in 5 days for the kids that had ended up in orphanages after the Boxing Day tsunamis.
Yep.
And, trying to keep them away from sex trafficking and drugs. And some of them had contracted HIV during all that. So there was drugs and all that we needed to help them with. Beautiful ride, very immersive. It was my second one that I'd done. And Trump started closing borders in the States. And I thought that's usually, when America sneezes, we tend to catch a cold.
Yeah, I love that. Yes.
So I'm like, look, everyone's like, it'll be fine. We're going to Bangkok like in a day and a half. It'll be sweet. And I'm like, get me out. I rang my PA while I was on the bike. We were heading into the final home to give all the gifts and all that, which was already set. And I'm like, look, I'll come and see, my family that I'm helping here, the kids that I'm helping, but get me out of here. Where can I fly to? I just need to get closer to Australia.
Yeah.
And they said, you can go to Melbourne or Brisbane. And I'm like, well, I've got luggage in Melbourne, which is where we are now. I've been coming here for 20 years.
Yeah.
And I flew into Melbourne. It was like Armageddon. Like I've got a lot of friends in hospitality and small interest in some hospitality groups.
Yeah.
And I was with the owners of these venues and it was sort of like the Titanic going down. They were having shots and saying, there goes my whole life. They just couldn't see out of it.
Yeah.
So that compounding with what was going on in your relationship and the business, bricks and mortar stores where you're sweating over each other, that was going to be a bit challenging in COVID.
Yeah.
I was also having a similar sort of period of awakening, I suppose, at the time. And it's interesting how our journeys have been so parallel.
Yes.
So in that comment about our journeys being parallel, is everyone at some level holding on to some level of trauma that's preventing them feeling who they really are, like you've described?
So I really believe in childhood, between the ages of 0 and 7, Tony Robbins talks about our emotional home is being formed. And, there are a lot of needs that we have as a child in order to develop our sense of self, our identity, and our self-worth. We're constantly looking to two people, mum and dad. Am I loved? Am I safe? Am I understood? These are core needs that we need met, emotional needs. Now, I really believe that, like for me personally, so many of those needs were not met. And I believe that there are lots of people in the world today when those needs are not getting met. And I hear a lot of people say, but no, I came from a good family. I just want to encourage you to just let go of that label. And most of us were raised by parents who were emotionally, stunted. And I want to help you understand. I want you to understand something. We can love someone and yet leave them feeling very unloved by us at times. So what happens is we have 4 core emotions that are sort of heavy: anger, sadness, fear, and shame. Now, when we go to express one of those emotions, a parent moves away from us, either physically, emotionally, energetically. They reject that emotion within us. What we start to learn is when I bring this online, love is taken away. So this is bad. I'm going to push this down. So perfect example, right? Little boys, when they are explosive with anger and mum shuts that down. Don't yell, don't scream, don't, or little girls, don't cry. So when we're rejected in those moments, we start to fracture. And then we start to build low self-worth. We start to really diminish our sense of self. And then that really carries on into adulthood until we wake up to our subconscious blocks and start to look at where are the little ways that we are performing and that we are shape-shifting. And people do this in lots of different ways, right? When we have a fractured sense of self, we will find a coping mechanism that worked in childhood and we will overuse it in adulthood. So
what's an example of that?
So overworking, overachieving, people pleasing, looking good, making people laugh, like being the funny one.
And what's this making up for though? How are we compensating?
Yeah.
What are they lacking in order to do that?
Well, because you in childhood were not allowed to be fully authentic and express all parts of yourself, you start to learn, you start to perform in ways because all we're working for is love and attachment, right? In childhood, we're driven to attach to mum and dad. And if they can't actually create that connection with us, we will find ways. So say, for instance, your relationship with mum and dad is a little bit distant until all of a sudden you come home from school and you've got an award. All of a sudden there's all this love and praise. Ding, ding, ding. Right, this is how I get love. So you just go out and work harder and harder and harder to get that love and praise because you want that love to be felt. So, and for some people it's being visible. For me, I grew up in a home where, a fair amount of disconnect and for me, being invisible, being sort of smaller and isolated was what kept me safe. So it's different for so many people, right? And what I encourage people to do listening to this podcast is ask yourself, what are the driving things that you feel you need to be? What's the mask that you wear when you're out in public? And how is that affecting you? How can you start to break through that and be more vulnerable? Because the thing is, everyone wants vulnerability, but everyone wants the other person to go first. And, I love what you do so much because you are always, at the forefront of going first. And so when people like you are willing to go first, it gives other people permission to do the same.
That's a really powerful observation you've got there about the value of people going first. And I don't feel like I've gone first. I feel like I'm the first of me that's gone first, but I've been looking for signals constantly and references, which is still there. And it might be a perfect nirvana world where we say, well, don't do anything because someone else does it. But humans in general are born to form tribes.
Yes.
Status is actually an evolutionary thing. And Cuddy talks about it in the book called Presence. He did a TED talk as well.
Yep.
And how status is actually safe and it's designed to bring people around us and form a safe community.
Yeah.
But status was formed very differently when it was about strength or looking after people physically.
Yes, yeah.
And now there's all these other ways and we've got to try and find something, a handle to grab onto. I'm studying at the moment tween-age years for our kids, they're turning 10 and 8 this year, and it's just such a gorgeous time. And particularly since moving to Melbourne, my connection with them as a parent and just the one-on-one time I have with each of them as I watch them evolve, it's amazing.
That's amazing.
And it's this period where they've gone from, we were the center of the universe, and it's starting to now they're figuring out who they are and how they fit in the world.
Yep.
But there's so much experimentation that needs to go on. I remember periods of time where I just needed to scream out loud when I was a kid.
Yeah.
And I feel like that could be present in most kids. I need to express rage or, I need to express, like you said with the boys.
Yep.
Or sadness. Sometimes you're sad without having a genuine reason you can tie it to.
Totally.
So much going on in the body at the time. And if each time that love comes and goes.
Yeah.
I could see how that could be a bit confusing.
Yeah. You look at typically men are taught never express sadness and women are taught never express anger. And the ironic thing is oftentimes we use the opposite to cover. So women will use sadness to really cover their rage and men will use anger to cover their sadness. And those four emotions, and I would add guilt in there as well because that's more and more becoming more prevalent. No one gets a free ride. I think we live in a world where we talk about mental health as if it's a separate thing, that some people have mental health and some don't. If you're a human being on the planet, you will experience emotions. You will have an emotional world. We all experience shame, fear, anger, sadness, guilt. And, there's a scale of consciousness, right? It's really fascinating. And the bottom, it's kind of broken up into thirds. And the bottom third are all the heavier, more dense emotions. I never say good or bad, positive or negative.
They're just heavier.
They're actually directives. You think about it, right? I'll tell you what each of them are. Anger is a result of needs not being met or boundaries being crossed. So you think about it, right? If someone was to step in and start stepping, like physically stepping into your boundary, you would start to get angry. That's a good thing because you're protecting yourself, right? Sadness is a lack of connection, love, and understanding. You don't feel understood in the world. Fear is a lack of stability, safety, and security. And then shame is a lack of, it's a feeling of being broken or not good enough. So each one has a directive. It teaches you something you need to change in your life to start to feel better. But if you don't allow yourself to work through those bottom tier emotions, you'll never get to the middle tier, which is accountability, willingness, courage, neutrality. They're just more neutral. And I noticed when I went through COVID and that first year where I fully let myself feel all these emotions, before that, I could never take feedback. I could never look at myself because I had so much shame that I had not resolved within me. So if you're dealing with someone, and this is great for leaders, right? If you're finding yourself managing someone that's really tricky and difficult for you, oftentimes it's because that person has a lot of unresolved shame that they are unable to take it on because it's poking a wound. So then you move into middle tier, and then once you move through that, you're in top tier, which is enlightenment, joy, freedom, authenticity, love, abundance. But you can't get to the top until you work through the bottom. So that's why this emotional work is so important. Once you start to develop a better relationship with these emotions and you don't reject them or suppress them or deny them so much, you actually naturally start to move up towards the top.
I love it how you've turned something that has so much opinion around it, like emotions and what they are and where they come from. And you've given people a framework or a matrix to go and kind of reference it and try it on for size with themselves.
Well, every man I talk to that I coach has a lot of anger, and it's usually in childhood, a lot of needs weren't met and a lot of boundaries were crossed. With women, I work with a lot of women that suffer from a lot of anxiety and a lot of fear, a lack of safety, stability, and security in childhood every day of the week. Sadness, it's, a lack of connection, love, and understanding. And then shame. So many people really shy away from that emotion, but actually we almost all have it in some place. And that's really important to recognize. Where do I feel shame? Like, where am I unable to be open? Where am I unable to take feedback? What do I make things mean sometimes? What's my inner talk like? We all have an inner child and an inner parent within us. And our inner child is like the scared, fearful, needing support, needing reassurance. And the inner parent is that wise adult, that loving, kind voice that is grounded and mature and trusting. And, if you don't have both of those within you, then you will be emotionally stunted. You will struggle in some way. And what I notice in business is I notice a lot of people have a lot of self-limiting thoughts and beliefs about who they are. They're very self-critical, judgmental, and shameful towards themselves. I love what Brené Brown says about perfectionism, right? I think a lot of people look at perfectionism as a trophy, as a badge of honor. But actually, perfection isn't about chasing excellence. Perfection is about running from shame. I love to pursue excellence, but if I fall short of that, I can bring on my inner parent and coach myself through it. Be like, you know what, you did your best. Maybe you need to work on these things. We'll go again and try again. I don't go into a shame spiral about how bad I am, how I didn't do a good job, what a terrible person I am. So I just invite people listening to this to consider that.
Have you always thought that way, or is this as a result of this breakthrough that you really started having in 2020?
Oh my God. Before 2020, I was the most negative, and it was really interesting because I was what you would say was the complete opposite of authentic. I was outwardly a very happy, outgoing, friendly person, but in the depth, the quiet, I was filled with shame, filled with self-doubt, filled with do I even belong here? Like something's wrong with me, something's broken inside of me. And it was so confusing. I remember I really did actually have a near suicide attempt in 2018. And I remember at the time being so confused. I was like, I do not get it. I'm a young, fit woman. I've got a business that's thriving. I've got an amazing community. I've got a partner that adores me, family that love me. Like, what is wrong? And it was really just that I was still running on those old, my father, when I was younger, he was in a lot of pain, right? So my father was, he was hearing impaired. He was sent to boarding school at a very young age and he had a lot of pain. And when he took me on, he was my stepfather, he actually projected a lot of that pain towards me.
In what way?
Yeah, big time, big time. He projected a lot of that towards me. Now, as a child, as a 4, 5, 6, 7-year-old, I couldn't look at him and think to myself, oh, Dad's actually in a lot of pain. He's using alcohol and drugs to numb himself, and some of that spills out onto me sometimes. There's nothing wrong with me. I'm worthy just as anyone on the planet is. I'm a good person. Don't listen to that. I don't have the emotional maturity to do that, right? So when children don't receive the love and connection from their parents that they need to thrive, we go into self-blame in order to self-soothe. So when I look at Dad and I'm 4, 5, 6, 7 and he can't love me the way that I need, I automatically go into, oh, it must be me. I must be broken. There must be something wrong with me. I need to change. And that was still going on into my 30s. And it wasn't until that breakdown happened that I realized that I was taking on all those beliefs that he had projected towards me, and I needed to heal that. I needed to change the way I thought about myself. I had to develop my self-worth from within and my self-esteem. And I had to remember that I'm a worthy human being on the planet just as anybody that works the earth is.
That comment about your father had kind of directed the pain towards you.
Yeah.
So what does that look like?
So interestingly, he used to always say to me, you're the black sheep of our family. And he would always try. And so isn't this interesting? You'll love this.
Because sometimes that's a compliment. Like,
yeah,
you're the black sheep,
no.
You're alternate, like good on you.
No, my father always, and please, I need to preface, we have a good relationship now.
Yeah.
We have a relationship now. We've done a lot of healing. But when I was growing up, we were very poor and we lived in housing commission, and, my dad did everything he could to provide for our family, but yet, and there were 3 children and I was the eldest. And I deep down think he had a lot of resentment towards me that we were so poor. And I think deep down he believed if I wasn't around, it would have been a lot easier on the family. So he used to always isolate me from the rest of the family. He would always try and separate me, right? I remember plenty of times we would sit down and watch a family movie and he would just take one look at me and look at the bedroom and say, off you go. And I would just get up and go to the bedroom because I knew I wasn't welcome there.
Whoa. Was there a big gap in age or something? Like,
no.
Were you a surprise third or anything? Oh, no, you're the first.
I was the first. So I was his stepdaughter. So my mum had me. I was 18 months when she met him. And then my sister and brother. I'm 3 years between my sister and I. And so there were all these moments of me being pushed out. So, and then funnily enough, because I had deaf parents, when I went to school, like what they say is if you don't belong in one part of your life, you'll work overtime to belong in other areas. So I went to school and I tried to fit in there, but I didn't fit in there because kids looked at me and were like, you've got deaf parents, you're weird, you're strange. So I got picked on there and I just didn't fit in anywhere. And isn't it funny, when I started LaSomme, I'll never forget, I wanted these words painted around the top of the gym. And I thought these words would inspire people so much. Things like beauty, strength, love, belonging, funnily. And anyway, I spent all this money to get these things painted. Not one person ever commented on it. Like no one cared.
Well, I remember looking at your logo.
Yes, true.
Because we were talking about like the different symbols.
Yes, the beautiful logo. And I remember sitting there being interviewed by the Herald one day. And I remember this woman asking me a little bit about my childhood and what brought me to create this gym that was all about belonging. And I remember she started asking me some questions about my childhood and I was sort of talking about my dad and she was like, isn't that interesting that you felt so isolated at home and now you've gone on to create this women's only gym that's all about belonging? And here I am like jaw on the floor, I had no idea. But we turn our mess into our message. So now looking back, I can clearly see I created LaSomme because I needed it for myself.
Oh. 100%. I mean, same with me with Fitbit.
Yes,
so did you say 2014?
Yes.
Was that the founding year?
No, 2014. Yeah, 2014 I started it.
Yeah.
2019 was when I sort of had that, near suicidal attempt.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. And so I remember at that point, I was so fractured. I remember finally admitting to some close family and friends like what I was going through, and everyone was so shocked. People were like, what? You're depressed? And I was really confused because I thought it was obvious, but it wasn't. And that's when I really realized I was living 2 different lives. And I think what's interesting now is I'm so open about my own, flaws, my faults, my, sadness and shame and fear. I'm so open, but yet I've never felt more connected to other people and myself than ever before.
That's such a powerful message, Naz. And I think it really does inform like what we're even doing here on FlowZone. Like a lot of people are, particularly founders, we've got a lot of founders that are watching and listening now. People are in leadership roles, but you can be a leader in your family. You can be a leader in your sports team. You don't have to be a founder of a business. It's just the business has it's got a way of bringing things out into the open that need to be looked at because there's this thing about the survival of the company if not. Whereas the thing is we can survive as a human without addressing our biggest issues.
Totally.
It's just slowly killing us, or it's slowly killing our ability to live.
Yes.
You know, live consciously and be present with life.
Yeah.
So hearing what you're saying about like this journey of being external to someone and different on the inside, I personally felt in my career in particular, when you're in a public facing role where like your personality, your profile, how you show up as, you know, as a human, when it's very public, so you can imagine TV presenters, like newsreaders, but also real estate, something where there's a mascot style, like a sports person or a leader, a speaker. One school of thought, and the new age probably tells us, be more of yourself, be more authentic because you'll find your tribe better. But I don't think that's been around forever, that kind of talk. I actually feel like the upbringing that the last few generations have had, like my parents were coming, you know, they were born in the late 50s, mid to late 50s.
Yeah.
They've come through a life where they were living in a depression. Then they had another one in the 90s. Right. And then we've come along somewhere in between all that with a lot of changes with the internet, with social media.
Yes.
But we're kind of new to experiencing this sharing and this who am I? And at first, most people, I think, when they get into business or something public, they do what our parents would have done and they try and be everything to everyone. And I feel like that is very tiring. It's very on the nervous system, on the soul. Like just being all of these people for everyone because like that's going to help them feel more comfortable to open up so I can understand them better and so we can do a better thing together or we can do a better thing for them. But when you're showing up that way most of your day, most days, then there's very little time to reflect on who I actually am and what actually matters to me. And so sometimes it takes this kind of this blowing up or this multiplication factor.
Oh, I agree 100%. And I know exactly what you mean. And I do think that this whole like focus on authenticity is new. And I also really welcome it but what I encourage people to do is instead of shape shifting and being a chameleon to match other people, you know, there's a great quote by this teacher and his student, and the student adores the teacher. And he's like, how can I be more like you? He's like, you can be more like me by being more like you. And it's so true. I think that when we're grounded in ourselves and we are living in authenticity, it's naturally energizing to us. Like this here is so energizing, right?
I when I'm chatting to you, I get this like tingle thing happening. And it's like, because part of me is contribution. Like,
of course.
Community contribution and creativity.
You always have been.
So I know that there's people out there that they're picking up these tingles too. Because it's more than just the finances or the assets or the extrinsic motivators of awards. There's a holistic success that's available to all of us.
Well, what human beings all desperately seek, without most of them are unconscious to it, is what's called self-actualization. And I think business is that's what the journey of business is. Your ability to be in business is all about your ability to overcome yourself. You know, I mean, you've been in business how long?
Well, this is my 20th year. In the property sector, property technology sector.
So how many emotions and hard times have you had to overcome? Fear, shame, anger, sadness, guilt. Like you would have had so many moments of like, what am I doing? Do I even want to do this anymore? And really, that's really overcoming yourself. It's your heavy emotions. And so that's why I think business is such an incredible pursuit to sort of attain, is because it's all about overcoming yourself over and over and over again. And it's the journey of self-actualization. Like, you know, we all desperately want to do the thing ourselves. We want to figure it out. We want to do it from scratch, and we want to know we're capable. We don't want other people to do it for us. In the work I do, I don't rescue anyone from their emotions. I don't rescue anyone. I'm literally just holding space. I'm a loving witness to let them move through their stuff and do their own healing.
A loving witness.
Loving witness. That's all we actually want. When we're going through a hard time, and I think a lot of people struggle with this, and I used to as well, because I used to just tell people what to do. I'd be like, here's the answer, just do it.
I'm so guilty of that.
Me too.
Even today, I do all the coaching training about it, and I just end up, let's just go there.
Yeah. And I remember once reading a quote saying, like, don't give people advice unless you're invited. And my jaw hit the ground. I was like, what? So what's really interesting, right, is like, there's a great quote, don't let your strengths negate your weaknesses. Now, what was interesting, a few months ago, I went and did this beautiful 2-weekend workshop, very, very powerful, very interactive. And as a part of that workshop, we had to send a list of 10 questions, very, very hard questions, to 5 people that were really close to us. And what was interesting was it kind of like some of the good things and some of the bad things about ourselves. What was so interesting was every single person I sent it to, and I sent it to a couple of ex-partners, everyone said, the one thing I love about you, Nez, is you're always my biggest cheerleader. You're encouraging me to be my best. You see things in me that no one else sees. Beautiful, awesome, great. Now, on the flip side, some of them said, sometimes you say things to me that really hurt. Sometimes you give me advice that I'm not asking for. Sometimes I feel like you criticize me and you shame me. And I was like, wow. I actually did not realize that's how people were experiencing me. So in an environment where I'm being invited and someone's saying, hey, I need your help, my coaching, my expertise, my insight is totally celebrated and welcomed. But when it comes to my family, my partner, people in that space, they don't want to be coached by me. They just want to be loved and witnessed and just accepted.
Yeah, the loving witness.
That was a painful sort of lesson for me to learn.
Well, but you've learned it now.
I still find myself like it's a body thing. Like I notice myself, I can feel my body when someone's talking and going through a hard time. I can feel myself like, ugh. And then I have to train myself to just
I know
breathe.
what it reminds me of. It reminds me of like, you've got a dog like a border collie, right? And you know how you go to chuck a tennis ball?
Yes.
And you just pretend to chuck that tenno?
Yes.
And the dog's like, whoa. But it's sort of like, a vice moment coming up. Like this person's got a problem. Where's the tenno? Chuck it. Oh, fuck it, I'm running anyway.
Exactly. I'm doing that all day long.
Yeah.
So I have to practice, relaxing.
So I imagine that since you've sort of come into more synchronicity now, so there's that sort of painful moment, dark night of the soul, combination effect. And then you get this awareness of what's going on. And then the goal is to ascend to self-actualization.
Yeah.
Because I sort of see, without an official definition, the self-actualization is becoming all the things about yourself that you're aware of and want to celebrate.
Yeah.
And then injecting that into every part of your life so it's harmonious.
Yep.
Business in particular has been an area where I'd been experimenting with that for a long time in little dribs and drabs on how to do it, but possibly without addressing those more dense parts of myself as well.
Yeah.
And so it's only really been, I feel like, the last couple of years, like in this journey, because I was entrepreneurial before I got into real estate. Like I was flipping motorbikes when I was in I think I was 11 or 12. Like that was my first actual job where I was selling stuff.
That's so cool.
So, and then McDonald's was the first one that I was on PAYG, 9 months it used to be back then. Yes. So we use those tools to find out things about ourselves so that we can be more of ourselves, so that we can go and insert that into other places. How do people do that if they are finding themselves in a role that they've been in their whole life? It's successful on all these fronts. It doesn't feel super broken. How do people do that when they're that far down the track?
Great question. So there are emotions and then there are sensations, 2 very different things. So an emotion that I used to struggle a lot with was shame. Now, shame, it was something I didn't really understand, but the feeling of shame, the sensation of shame, I knew very well. So shame for me, when I experience a moment where I'm feeling shame, I feel this flood of heat. I feel fire flash through my body and I feel fire in my face. Sadness is like an aching pit in my stomach. Fear is like a fluttering of the chest. And anger is like my whole body shakes and I get really shaky. Now, I really believe what most people need to do is start tuning into the body. The body has wisdom that most people have no idea about. And I think what we need to do is we need to listen to what's happening in our body, our sensations, and start listening to the little ways it's whispering to us every single day. So for me, when I quit that corporate job to start LaSomme, I remember feeling this ache in my stomach, like this sickness in my stomach as I was driving to work. And I'll never forget pulling over the side of the road where I called my boss and I was like, I'm done. Now that was me for the first time in such a long time listening to what was happening in my body. I was feeling this total clash. And sometimes, like at that point, I didn't have any responsibility. I was able to just quit it and just tap out. But a lot of people have responsibilities. I have mortgages, I have kids. But I think the more you listen to the whisper within, the more it will direct you on the right path. And then little things will start to happen. Like it'll start to just feel like you're in flow. Like it's easy, right? It's like when I started LaSomme, I had no money. I had, I was not a qualified trainer. I had no idea how to start a business, but yet the meeting with you just happened so easily. And then a few days later, I just happened to meet another real estate agent that worked in commercial space, and he showed me a space. And then a few days after that, my boss invited me to go back and do some work so I could get the money to go and start the business. Like all these little synchronistic things just happen, and it was just easy. Whereas opposed to when you're pushing and everything's just going against you, that's when I think it's like take stock and just shift 1 degree. You don't need to change your life overnight, but just shift in 1 degree. I want you to think about 2 cruise ships sailing along in the ocean and they're all headed for a huge iceberg. If one ship turns 1 degree, over time, that ship misses that iceberg. So that 1 degree might be to sit and meditate in silence for 5 minutes each day and just listen to what comes in. It might be to practice going for a walk around the block when you feel triggered and activated. It might be I'm going to start learning how to say no to things because I'm a people pleaser and I'm just doing all the things for other people and not for myself. I always say to people, the medicine for you might not be the medicine for me. Usually the medicine comes from the opposite of what you normally do. So for me, I was such a people pleaser. I said yes to everyone. For me, the medicine was in actually saying no sometimes, right?
I like it how you've said sometimes there though.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of people are thinking, all right, we're going to do this ship thing.
Yep.
Here we're going.
Yeah.
And I'm going to avoid that iceberg. I'm going to go that way.
Yeah.
And it's like there are times when turning 180 makes total sense.
Yes.
Like right now I'm doing it in real estate. I'm turning the whole industry around to face the customer because we've been facing ourselves.
Yeah.
Trying to make, I hope you're happy there and the staff. Oh, yeah, what can I do for you? Oh, we've got a couple of clients. Like, what are we going to do for them? But what we're really doing is just creating a world that's better for ourselves to do more of what we're doing. Whereas if we spin around and we look at them, then we can understand their needs, empathise, and we'll actually feel a lot more fulfilled in it because we're getting constant feedback that it's what they want too. And then we feel we can raise as a profession. So 180 makes sense in certain contexts. But in this context, I like the 1 degree thing.
Yeah.
Because you said, just say no sometimes. Like if you start saying no to everything, people are going to be like, what the fuck is going on with this person? They used to say yes all the time.
Well, it's funny you say that because, I look at so much of life as 2 sides of a pendulum, right? And you see this a lot. You see a lot of people pleasers finally wake up to the fact that they're people pleasers. So they swing right down the other side of the pendulum and then all of a sudden they're like to everyone like, fuck you.
Like a hermit.
And it's like, no. We need to find the integration, the middle ground. So I'll give you a good example of that, right? I had a client reach out to me who was going through domestic violence years ago. This was 3 years ago. She was like, Nez, I need your help. I'm coming out of a domestic violent relationship. It's abusive. I need support. No problem. Come and work with me. Here are the details. Back and forth. She disappeared. Never heard from her. And I was like, that's interesting. Anyway, she didn't go and get help. What she did was she jumped straight into a relationship with the opposite man. So someone who was really gentle, kind, loving, supportive. Now, a year later, she reaches back out to me and she's like, Nez, I need your help. And I'm like, what's going on? Worked out, she'd left that relationship, avoided her healing, jumped into the complete opposite, and now she's repelled by him because he's a pushover. She's like, I don't know what's wrong with me. I'm fantasizing about this guy again, the one that abused me. She did not find integration. She did not find the middle ground, which is a healthy masculine man that can say no to her and set boundaries, but will also love and support her. So, take that analogy and put it into whatever you will, but it's essentially so many people are not finding the middle ground of integration. So it's not swinging from one side of the pendulum to the other because you think about it, right? any painful thing that's happened, there is still gift and wisdom. For me, my childhood, that was painful. And there are many times where I think to myself, God, if only I had a better childhood, I would have been so much better in life. But you know what? I would never have started FlowZone. I would never be doing what I'm doing now. I've had not one, 2 careers that have been so fulfilling and like absolutely rewarding. I would never have had a run-of-the-mill good childhood. So while I can sit there all day and look at and demonize my father, I also have to see the gift in that pain as well. And that comes through integration.
Some of the best gifts come badly wrapped.
Yeah, so true. That's actually a good one. Never heard that before.
Well, there's oh man, so much stuff is just lit up in my brain that I could just go down the rabbit hole with you.
Yes.
And I reckon our viewers and listeners are probably having a similar experience right now in honouring their time as well as yours. Yeah. I'm going to sort of bring this to a bit of a close.
Yeah.
And it's hard to do so because I reckon we can go another couple of hours.
I know, I can talk.
Well, we're on a topic that is really immersive for both of us. It's really our world.
Yeah.
So what I will do here is create a bit of space for you to do something I know you love doing, which is contribute. And it's to our viewers and listeners. We know that everyone has potential to go through the dark night of the soul. And some of us may be repressing the opportunity to go through the dark night of the soul.
Yeah.
And so when people are dealing with emotional issues or things that are playing out as mental health, whether they think that they've had it all their life or they're just going through a hard time, what is your kind of advice to those people that are in that mode now, in that dark night of the soul? What's the next step for them?
I love that question. I think the first thing, if you're going through this right now, chances are you're coming from a place of living that inauthentic life. You've been living a lie. You've been hiding parts of yourself. I think the first step is to be more open and honest with the people that love you, your family, your partner, and start actually sharing this part of you that feels really lost and scared and broken and afraid. And then I think the first thing to do is get support. And, when I had FlowZone, I had money, right? I was seeing a psych for years. I had all the money in the world to put towards my healing, but I was not progressing, right? But then when I went through that breakdown and I had no money because my business was falling apart and I was so eager to understand myself, I found everything I needed to through books, podcasts, YouTube. You don't need money. Like if you have the capacity to pay for a coach, do that. But if you don't, there is so much out there that's available for free online. There is so much. No amount of money can help someone heal that's not ready to heal, and no amount of not having the money can stop someone who's really ready.
That's a powerful message there.
It's true,
it's kind of like there's an abundance of opportunity if you are willing to receive it. And abundance comes from gratitude. Gratitude's a gateway to abundance.
Yes.
And it's usually about being grateful for what's already present rather than looking for something that's not there is actually closer to scarcity than abundance.
Yes, exactly.
That's powerful, Naz. Look, thank you very much for coming on FlowZone. Thank you for coming to Melbourne and making a client trip happen so that we can have this conversation today. And I just love your journey. I love hearing more about it. I'm still learning from you today.
Thank you. Well, thank you for the opportunity. And like I said, I'd travel anywhere to speak to you. I would not be here if it wasn't for you having all that faith in me 15 years ago. So I'm just grateful to have met you and very thankful to you for where I am now. So I hope your listeners get a lot of value from this.
Well, my gift to you to finish this off is it's actually a gift for me and it's a hug.
Oh, I love that.